Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views we hope are relevant to you. Well, it's been a massive 24 hours for Sikh politics in the Punjab. After we reported yesterday on the potential downfall of the Badal family's grip on Sikh institutions in the region, and by extension the Indian state, we report on what happened at that meeting of the Akal Takht, the reaction from around the Sikh diaspora as the outcome was announced, and the shocking overnight news just coming in of an assassination attempt of Badal shortly after. And we'll show the video and information behind the attempt. Also, in today's show, we continue our look at foreign interference and how India's deliberate interference in Canadian politics could well have links to the next potential right-wing government of the country. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for joining us yet again for another fun-filled, exciting educational package of what we call Perspectives. Thanks for joining us.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll be taking a look at loads of your great comments which you've been filling up below the video, so thank you as always for those. Right, James, lots to get through today. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
It comes out with more information looking at the interference of the India government and the allegations that are flying now when it comes to the Conservative Party of Canada's leadership race. Now, this is something that we've touched on in the past, but it's breaking news once again in the CBC because more information and more people are coming forward to speak about how this interference has played out within the Conservative Party of Canada. This, of course, would be known by the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, had he have gotten his top security clearance, and he still has not done that. He still refuses. And a lot of people are asking the question, why? Why is he refusing to go through the process? And as more and more information on the India interference comes out, we are starting to get a picture as to what may be contributing to his reluctance to get that security clearance. Of course, we know that there has been a lot of India content when it comes to the parliamentary investigation into foreign interference, and this just brings it further along. Now, the CBC article has quoted about 5 different people in terms of the current investigation and inquiry into the leadership race of the Conservative Party, in which, of course, Pierre Poilievre says he knows nothing about, that he doesn't know where all of this is coming from, and that he doesn't have previous knowledge of any attempt by the India government to influence the outcome of that race or involvement in the party as a whole. This, of course, is very concerning because, again, if he would have gotten his security clearance, he would be privy to a lot more information. As someone who wants to move forward and take the role of the Prime Minister of Canada in the next election, it is really coming into question whether or not he will be leading the Conservative Party at that time when an election is called. And some speculate that that is why he keeps trying to move for a non-confidence vote against the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. They figure that because of the future being more bleak when it comes to Pierre Poilievre, that he wants an election sooner than later so that he has an opportunity or a chance of holding on to power. But again, a lot of people are starting to question whether or not he will even be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada come the next election. One of the main frontrunners was a Conservative Party of Ontario leader and also the mayor of Brampton, which we know is the home of one of the largest Sikh diasporas in Canada. And the influence there has gone right to the level, or the accusations, right to the highest level of MPs in Ottawa. Now, of course, they are looking at this because of the fact that one of the MPs that's in question is a Conservative MP by the name of Michelle Rempel Garner of Calgary. Now, what's interesting is that the CBC did try to confront her the other day in the House of Parliament, or the House of Commons, and she ran like a scared mouse. She could not get out of there fast enough to avoid these questions on the record. And she came out with a statement later, of course, denying any involvement or influence by the government of India. And her exact statement was that in no instance was I coerced in any manner by anyone at any time. I'm an experienced parliamentarian, seasoned communicator, and former cabinet minister who has proven more than capable of developing senior grade positions early and entirely based on her read of a situation. Suggesting otherwise is ridiculous. So again, she just basically denies it. And that was in a canned statement that she sent out to the media. But at the time that she was trying to be interviewed, she, of course, ran out. Some of these allegations were brought up by Baz News and Angus. You've brought them up many a times, as have I. They are a very reputable news source that's an outlet for the Sikh community here in Canada. And they seem to really have a good hold and actually have had much information ahead of time based on their connection with the Sikh community, and the truth of what's going on seems to be catching up with exactly what they've been reporting. Now, Mayor Brown of Brampton, again, was the leader of the Ontario Progressive Party, Conservative Party. He definitely was a front runner to take the leadership of the Conservative Party. That failed, and again, we are looking at all of the compiled information, the ongoing investigations, and we definitely see all fingers pointing back to India when it comes to the main source of interference. Now, this one here with the CBC goes on in quite lengthy information. I encourage you to take an opportunity to read it online. It is very informative and really shows and shines a light on the direct influence of the consulate, of other members of the India government, and even Patrick Brown when he was supposed to make appearances at certain events that were being put on by the Hindu community. He was actually contacted and told that because he has upset people at the India consulate and from the Hindu community, and we're talking the political community, they pulled support for him and told him not to bother attending because he wasn't welcome any longer. So we'll have to watch this story, Angus, and really see how this plays out. But this is another bombshell on the Conservative Party of Canada, but also on the level of interference that India has been playing here in Canada.
Yeah, I'm certainly no expert in Canadian politics, but it's, we often use the phrase can of worms, but it appears there's a real can of worms opening up in Canadian politics with this whole Indian interference issue. And of course, Canada has proved the welcome home for a very large section of the Sikh diaspora. So of course, what happens with Canadian politics does indeed have a huge impact on the Sikh diaspora. And in the form of Trudeau, they have found a very powerful representative, a friend in many ways for the community. As we've often reported, he's had the courage to stand up against this oppression and this interference from India, particularly at a time when India have really been extending, I would say, even say overextending their capabilities in terms of trying to influence foreign agendas. But the big question is what's going to happen next. So we, of course, are seeing, as is usual in politics, a bit of a backlash from a current administration to probably a new administration once Canada goes back to the polls, if it swings to the right, as is, I guess, looking likely. Poilievre, well, as you said, James, the big question is he going to be there still in that position of leadership? Clearly, he has an awful lot to hide. And again, we've often raised this question of why is he not taking his privilege to look at these confidential issues that is normally expected for the leader of the opposition. Again, he clearly has a lot to hide. There must be a very good reason why not, and it's what's not being said more than what it has been said. I think that implies the most. So, yeah, I think whoever, if Poilievre isn't there, then who will replace him? The big question there is, will that new leader, assuming they do then become the next government of Canada, will they be friends to the Sikh diaspora? Who knows? I think probably, James, you're much more qualified to comment on that. What I would say, though, is that the right wing globally has, of course, formed a target for the right wing of India, the Hindutva forces in India. They're obviously naturally aligned, should we say, to the right wing forces around the world. They see a ready alignment with many of the right wing. Certainly, we've seen that here in the UK. And no doubt across North America, for example. We do know that many of our right-wing, and when I say right-wing, I'd say more on towards the extremes, they do tend to align themselves with the right-wing of India, because essentially they're being courted by India and the powerful forces of India, who of course have powerful media influence and powerful global media outlets in the form of ANI and other huge networks. And of course, the right wing here in the West is a little bit naive to Indian politics. In fact, not just a little bit, they are completely naive to Indian politics, and certainly the politics of Khalistan and the Punjab. So, of course, they find anybody who's willing to support their cause, of course, they welcome them with open arms. So along comes Hindutva, offering all these hugely funded resources. And, of course, the right wing in all these nations saying, yeah, thank you very much. We'll take support from wherever it comes. And unfortunately, that support then does, of course, start influencing the right-wing agenda in Canada, in the US, here in the UK. And, of course, that agenda is to turn against the Sikh community. And that, of course, is the fear that I think, no doubt, James, you'll be expressing and watching in Canadian politics. So, yeah, I think we're going to have to watch this one closely. And if Poilievre, we know certainly Poilievre is definitely no friend of the Sikhs. Many of his pronouncements that even I've seen from over here across the other side of the Atlantic have certainly not been, I would say, favourable towards the Sikh diaspora. So it certainly would do no harm if he disappeared from the scene. But the question is then, James, who's going to replace him? I think we're going to have to watch that very closely.
Absolutely. And one of the names being thrown around right now is Doug Ford, who is a very outspoken, we'll say, premier of the province of Ontario. But he is a no-nonsense guy who doesn't mince his words. So it'll be interesting to watch how that takes place. When it comes to the top security clearance, I don't know how they would do a polygraph test on a politician. I think the machines would explode.
I think that'd be a lost cause.
But as we look at different technologies, let's move gears again, Angus, to take a look at the series I've been doing all week here, and that is the foreign interference, foreign policy, and the impacts on the future of Khalistan. Now, one of the biggest tools that has been developed over the last 50 years that could be a huge benefit or a drawback to Khalistan is, of course, the internet itself. Now, the cyber world and cybersecurity, of course, plays into a big role when it comes to disinformation or accurate information. Either side of the coin has the advantage of utilizing the internet to bring the international community closer and sharing that information. But again, we talk about it all the time in terms of the bots, in terms of the boiler rooms full of people just propagating more and more misinformation on behalf of the BJP and the Hindutva, basically the IT army that's online, and it just continues. So as we take a look at how the history and the evolution of the Khalistan movement has taken place, the influence of foreign policy and foreign relations, I thought it was important to take an opportunity to actually allow people to understand how the internet has come to be where it is and how it is also influencing international policy. But it is still a wild, wild west when it comes to the internet and cyber attacks and, of course, the relay of information. The bright side, Angus, is that we are on the air here because of the advancements of the internet and the ability to share the truth and to counter the narrative of the Hindutva media. So again, it is, a double-edged sword, so to speak. But let's take a look here at the history of the internet and how it has evolved and how it can be a big tool for Khalistan moving forward.
It seems impossible to imagine life without the internet, but it was created just decades ago, in 1969. The United States Defense Department worked with several universities to connect a set of computers through a network called ARPANET, allowing the government and researchers to send scientific information back and forth across the country. These first users mostly knew and trusted each other, but over the years, with the advent of personal computers, individuals outside the research community started joining the network. And in 1991, Tim Berners-Lee introduced the World Wide Web, a system for connecting files to each other across the internet, allowing users to easily explore a vast world of information, often referred to as cyberspace. The US government soon outsourced management of the network. A nonprofit organization called ICANN was created to administer the internet's addresses and domains, and private companies sold internet services to users. The web continued to grow exponentially, becoming the defining feature of modern life, where any user can interact with any other user anywhere, almost instantaneously. Through the internet, businesses, governments, and all types of organizations are able to gather more information, conduct more commerce, and operate more efficiently. But with these enormous benefits come enormous challenges. The internet was designed by a community that trusted its members to act in good faith. Yet, this important tool is no longer in the sole hands of friendly scientists. Now, 4 billion people, around half the world's population, have internet access. The very connections that make our lives easier also expose us to a world of danger. Many governments are seeking to tame cyberspace by addressing 3 major policy issues: cybersecurity, data privacy, and online rights. Cybersecurity is about building protection against the threats that lurk in cyberspace. We upload tons of personal information to the internet, from photos to credit card numbers. And companies and governments keep intellectual property and top-secret information online, too. But the internet connects all of us, and some people use it to access our information without permission. This is called hacking. Hackers often steal banking information or hold computer systems hostage for financial gain. But hacking isn't just a criminal enterprise. Hackers can also work on behalf of governments to conduct cyber espionage, stealing other countries' sensitive information for economic and military advantage. Sometimes, governments can use the stolen information as a political weapon. For example, Russian agents hacked the US Democratic National Committee in order to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. Hackers can also conduct cyber attacks, disrupting or destroying other countries' computer systems, even potentially causing catastrophic damage in real life. The first such attack was reportedly conducted by the United States and Israel in 2008, when they used the Stuxnet computer virus to destroy 1/5 of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. Unlike traditional warfare, there's no international consensus about how governments should and should not act in cyberspace. While some countries, like the United States, may call for others to act responsibly, they resist agreeing to any rules that limit their own cyber capabilities. Even if there were rules, though, and a country were to break those rules, there's no shared understanding of how the world should respond to cyber rule-breaking. Complicating matters, cyber attacks can be nearly impossible to attribute. Hackers often mask their identities and hide their locations by routing attacks through servers in many different countries. Even if a victimized government does manage to identify its attackers, it may not be able to tell whether the hackers were working as another country's agents or whether they were working on their own. This is problematic because traditionally, countries are deterred from attacking other countries out of fear of retaliation. But with cyber attacks, if a country doesn't know who exactly attacked it, then it doesn't know who to retaliate against. And without the threat of retaliation, countries are more likely to use cyber attacks. So without the ability to fully deter cyber attacks, it's up to countries, businesses, and individuals to protect themselves, making it harder for hackers to access information without authorization and making systems more resilient to damage when they are hacked. Improving cybersecurity can be tough for individuals because our information is exposed across cyberspace in ways we may not even know. It's a matter of data privacy, the degree to which a person controls the information they share online. You may think that you're being careful with your information, but you could be sharing it without realizing. When we visit websites, we often allow them to collect data about our age, location, activities, and much more. The companies behind those websites can sell that information and create targeted ads that follow us around the internet. And if the information is stolen, those companies have little obligation to inform us. Data privacy advocates are trying to protect our information online, but there's no global agreement as to how it should be done. Controlling how digital information is shared is not just a concern for individuals. It's also the focus of certain countries that don't value online rights, the concept that everyone should have the right to full internet access. Some governments, like China, advocate for cyber sovereignty, arguing that their borders apply to cyberspace and they should be able to control how people and businesses use the internet within their territory. The United States and its allies disagree with this approach. They support internet freedom, the concept that everyone should be free to express themselves and interact with anyone else, anywhere online, allowing for new ideas to spread freely. Amid the global disagreement, technological innovation continues to accelerate at a tremendous speed. Billions of items are getting connected to cyberspace, from cars to kitchen appliances, even surfboards, forming an ever-growing Internet of Things. This new era of connectivity underscores the need for international arrangements that would encourage responsible cyber practices and discourage harmful ones. Ideally, these arrangements would persuade governments to act responsibly and do all in their power to stop individuals, companies, and other countries from breaking the cyber rules within their territory. But we're nowhere close to establishing such arrangements, and they'll only get harder to achieve as our lives become increasingly tangled with the internet, as the threats from cyberspace put our world in greater danger.
So once again, Angus, thank you to the Council on Foreign Relations as we've put together the series this week, and tomorrow, of course, I'll be wrapping it all together. But just the importance of people understanding how the internet works, because people take it for granted. They use it every day, but they really don't know how it started or how it's used. But also the lack of any type of regulation when it comes to the opportunity for governments to misuse it. And that is something that we are seeing as a real danger when it comes to foreign interference, especially coming out of countries like India. Now, of course, we see as well the advantages, as I stated before the video started, is that we can use it to counter the false narratives and the false information. But it's also a matter of who is looking at the information and how is it being spread. As the video clearly defined, that certain countries are blocking what can be and what cannot be seen within their borders. So they're able to block certain information on the internet, including our show, Angus, as an example, that we are not allowed to be seen in India. And that is, again, another concern. But it is really playing into the opportunity as long as the pro-Khalistan community really sticks together to be able to form a very intelligible and concise message to the rest of the world. The importance of their support for Khalistan, why that's important, and again, the internet, I think, can be a major, major tool, as it has been, in forwarding that whole procedure and process, Angus.
Yeah, I don't think many people actually realise the fact that we are lucky enough, if that's the right word, to be living through what I believe is one of the most significant periods in human history. I think what we're going through now is even more important than the Industrial Revolution. I think this is almost as significant as the discovery of fire, for example. The internet and the age of digitalisation is literally transforming human society. It's actually almost rewiring the human brain in many ways. But we are living in an era where literally our lives are starting to move into cyberspace. And I actually predict that one day, in the not too distant future, our whole lives, most of our awake time in life will be lived in a virtual reality, in a virtual 3D world, rather than actually in the real world. But anyway, that's a prediction which I've always felt ever since it first started appearing. But yeah, the internet is literally revolutionising life ever since its inception. I mean, well, you and I, James, we're both old enough to, of course, remember the pre-internet days and how how simple life was, should we say, but also how hard it was in many ways. I mean, for example, if you needed a telephone number, you had to get a book that thick to find a telephone number. Now, I don't even know a single telephone number. I don't need to know it. I just go online and suddenly I can connect immediately to anywhere literally on the planet. And it is literally revolutionising everything that we see, hear and do. We can communicate across the world in an instant. We can send information across the world in an instant. And so the big question then, back to sort of, I suppose the topic in hand is it's all about influence and spreading information. And in the old days, pre-internet days, it was very easy to influence the population of a nation if they had television or radio, is because you only had, literally like one or two stations, television stations. I mean, I remember when I was a child, I think we had 3 television channels, and that was the only media other than a newspaper that essentially you got access to, a few radio stations. And therefore any government could very easily control what its population thought, in simple terms, because it controlled the media. It was very easy to control that media. Now, you fast forward to today, and the internet has sprung literally an infinite amounts of outlets. Anybody on this planet can start a media outlet by just going onto YouTube and broadcasting, and that is how easy it is. So it's actually, in many ways, it's become much harder for governments and bad actors to influence the agenda, or indeed good actors to influence the agenda. And it also means that we are also in the era of misinformation. So it's, as you rightly said, James, it is a double-edged sword. It is so good in so many ways. The internet has brought so much good to the planet. It literally means I, in an instant, can go online and find out how to do anything from brain surgery to how to build a rocket that will go to the moon. I mean, that is literally the information that is at our fingertips, the latest, greatest scientific research, or how to mend my plumbing in my house. It has revolutionized our lives. And however, the downside, of course, is it means that an awful lot of misinformation is easily spread around. It means that people can be bullied, influenced in a bad way. Elections can be influenced. Populations on a large scale can be influenced, etc., etc. But it does mean, James, as you rightly said, it also means that we, likewise, can exist. I mean, who could have dreamed when we were children that it was how easy it would have been for you and I, James, to sit here and broadcast to tens of thousands of people all around the world from our tiny little studios with just a handful of equipment, is that we just ourselves have this power of influence that was just not even reachable to our equivalents, just even 20, 30 years ago. So it has been a force for bad, it has been a force for good. We are entering a new era where new regulations, new controls need to be brought in, where we have to police ourselves. The humanity itself will have to police itself and ease itself into this new era and recreate new rules, new ways of living. And literally, as I said at the beginning, it is restructuring our society and is literally almost rewiring our brains in how we treat the modern world. So, as I said, James, we are living in very, very exciting times, and what I believe is one of the most significant times in human history.
Absolutely, and you're dead right that we grew up without the internet, so it has been a whole evolution for us to come along with that. I mean, I remember back the big excitement when we were little kids and we got, we moved from black and white to a color television and still had limited channels, but we didn't have the same access to information that maybe other kids did growing up in, we'll say, a less affluent area. We thought, families were rich when they had all that information, what we called the encyclopedias. When a home had encyclopedias, hey, they're doing pretty good. I mean, we came from a neighborhood where, the excitement was, our parents cutting holes in our pockets so we had something to play with.
Different times, very different times.
It's been a change in the world, but it's also given a lot of access to a lot more people, which I think is a benefit. And moving forward, again, if people understand the risks, then they're able more to be aware of it and to prevent themselves from falling to that.
Absolutely. Great things, but also very risky things. It's how we manage it going forward. Okay, let's move on and let's come crashing back to Earth with more earthly issues. And we mentioned a couple of days ago, I covered the meeting of the Akal Takht in the Punjab on Monday. And it was a very significant meeting. And it was designed and it was called by the Jathedar of the Akal Takht to hold Sukhbir Badal to account, this character who forms part of a family who have been accused of many things in the past and have been accused essentially by many within the community of really dragging down the institutions that have in the past been allowed the voice of the Sikh community to be raised and to manage the Sikh community. But of course it's been infiltrated by Indian actors, by Indian state actors, and as we often refer to, with a deliberate agenda to try and divide and dilute and break down the power of the Sikh voice in the Punjab particularly. Well, this meeting happened on Monday. The outcome was very interesting. And there's been an awful lot of news coming in overnight. An awful lot's happened in the last 24, 48 hours since this meeting. And I'm just going to try and, at least over the next 15 minutes, just try and summarise an enormous avalanche of information that's come in, an avalanche of reaction, and in fact some pretty shocking things that have happened since the pronouncements from the meeting. Now, first of all, I think obviously the first place to start is what actually happened at that meeting. Well, I'll quickly summarise the outcome of the meeting. Now, Prakash Singh Badal, he's the father of Sukhbir. Prakash Singh Badal has been posthumously stripped of the Panth Ratan Fakhr-e-Qaum title by the Akal Takht. Now, the Fakhr-e-Qaum title is literally translated as Pride of the Nation. Essentially, it's an honour bestowed upon Prakash Singh Badal. In the past, it is a title that's only been awarded to a very small number of people, a small number of Sikhs in history. And it is an enormous thing to be awarded this. It is an honour, bestowed by the community, by the Sikh nation, upon a very small number of people. And Prakash was awarded this. However, because of misdeeds, he has been stripped of this. And I don't believe this has ever happened before in the past, actually. And I'm sure our audience will correct me if I'm wrong. But he's been stripped of it. The decision citing misdeeds against Sikh interests during his tenure as Punjab Chief Minister. And it was made during this gathering of SGPC appointed Jathedars at the Akal Takht on Monday. Now, Sukhbir Singh Badal admits his mistakes before Akal Takht Sahib. He acknowledged granting pardon to Sirsa Dera head Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh in the blasphemy incident. Sukhbir also admitted to promoting police officers who were involved in the killing of innocent Sikhs. Additionally, he confessed to giving advertisements in newspapers regarding Ram Rahim's apology. Sri Akal Takht Sahib Jathedar Jani Raghbir Singh Ji ordered the placard to be worn around the neck by the leaders guilty of religious misconduct while performing seva. And Jathedar Jani Raghbir Singh Ji orders all the facilities given by SGPC to the former Jathedar of Sri Akal Takht Sahib, Jani Gurpachan Singh, should be withdrawn. Now, I don't have time to go into a lot of detail covering this, and I'm hoping tomorrow, as I say, there's an awful lot. When you start peeling back the layers of the complex politics of the Punjab and of these organisations, whether it's the SGPC or the Akal Takht, it just reveals even more complexities and even more bigger stories. And we don't have time, unfortunately, to go into that. But tomorrow I'm hoping just to at least put some flesh on the bones of this, because there is an awful lot of quite shocking politics and incidents that have happened over the last sort of 30, 40 years that led up to a lot of this, and the politics of the SGPC, how it's been infiltrated, and how actually this Badal family have been essentially installed by the Indian state to create the problems that we're now seeing today, that unfortunately now the Sikh community is pushing back on and throwing the Badal family out again. So hopefully I'll cover a lot of the politics that led to where we are today in tomorrow's coverage. But anyway, so yeah, the outcome of this meeting, pretty significant. And I'll quickly show you this video here. And this is
किन्ने कीती सी गदारी किन्ने किथे सट मारी किवें सिक्खी दा गुलाब ऐदां खिड़िया नहीं रहा सानू सोचना पऊगा किवें सिख राज गया सानू सोचना पऊगा.
Now I believe that is Sukhbir Singh Badal holding his placard, or at least having his placard draped around his neck in a most humiliating fashion, essentially on the orders of the Akal Takht. So this is a tremendous downfall of this figure from the Badal family. And finally, it is a wonderful sign that the Sikh community are finally at last pushing back and managed to retake at least some form of control of certainly of the SGPC and the Akal Takht and many of these institutions that have so far have been undermined by the Indian state. Now, in terms of reaction, the reaction has actually been, I would say, following quite a similar theme from many of the organisations around the world. I'm just going to focus on, in the UK, a couple of reactions. Firstly, the Sikh Federation UK, they have made a statement, and again, it follows pretty much a similar theme. They said that the leadership of the Sikh Federation UK, along with its strategy board and national executive team, they've expressed strong support in this press release for the recent public pronouncements made by the Singh Sahiban at the Akal Takht. They praised the historic moment when the Shiromani Akali Dal leadership was publicly held accountable for their errors at last, which they believe is a critical first step in restoring the Akal Takht sovereignty. Again, it refers back to taking back control. The Federation also endorsed the removal of the Fakhr-e-Qawm title, this award, this honour that was granted, previously awarded to Prakash Singh Badal, highlighting his long-standing betrayal of the Sikh Panth. The Federation strongly criticised the SAD leadership under Badal's direction for its failure to protect the community's interests and uphold justice for victims of post-1984 atrocities. They called for stronger measures to ensure that the leadership, including Sukhbir Badal, be permanently removed from public and political life, emphasising the need for unity within the SAD and a renewal of its credibility. So very strong words from the Sikh Federation. I think, again, the theme is, look, it's a start. It may be not quite strong enough yet, but it's a start, and it's an important start that we start pushing back and uniting and taking back control. So here in the UK also, one of our largest Gurdwaras in Smethwick in the Midlands, the president of the Gurdwara, he's forwarded their latest press release. And likewise, the Guru Nanak Gurdwara stands with the Akal Takht Sahib on its decisive action against those guilty of religious misconduct. So the Gurdwara wholeheartedly supports the stance taken by the Jathedar, Sri Akal Takht Sahib, Jani Raghbir Singh Ji, and the Akal Takht Sahib against Sukhbir Badal and his associates for their detrimental influence on the Sikh Panth. So once again, all these organisations recognising how these figures, particularly personified in the Badal family, have deliberately, detrimentally, that's harmfully influenced the Sikh Panth and the whole running and organisation and management of the Sikh community. For far too long, these individuals have caused significant harm to the Sikh community, deliberately so, of course, undermining its core values and principles. The decisive action taken yesterday was long overdue and represents a critical step towards accountability. While we believe the response could have been stronger, so again they think, look, it's still not enough, but it's a start. We commend the decision to hold Sukhbir Badal and his companions accountable. Witnessing Sukhbir Badal brought to his knees before the Akal Takht Sahib, a stark departure from his previous arrogance, where he presumed to dictate terms to our esteemed Jathedars and Singh Sahibs, it marks a pivotal moment in restoring the dignity and authority of the Akal Takht Sahib. So again, once again, taking back control. Guru Nanak Gurdwara Smethwick fully endorses this type of decisive leadership by the Jathedars and urges them to continue to take bold and firm steps to uphold the integrity and sovereignty of the Sikh Panth. Important word there, sovereignty. The Sikh community remains steadfast in its unwavering support for Akal Takht Sahib as they work to safeguard our cherished values, traditions and institutions. Now, I'm also going to refer you to a letter. This is important, this is a letter that the Guru Nanak Gurdwara here in the UK actually submitted to the Akal Takht in the Punjab back in January of this year. And they actually, again, this is all about grassroots pressure, pushing back up this tree of the community, this tree of management, should we call it in simple terms, managing the global Sikh community. And they sent this letter to the Akal Takht, to the Jathedar, covering various issues, obviously issues well known that we talk about on a regular basis. They included, for example, transnational repression by the Indian government, targeting Sikh activists across the West, the Sikh response in the UK in the general election year to the demonisation and targeting of Sikh activists by the UK government under Rishi Sunak to appease India. Of course, we talked a lot about that. The recent controversy over the 25-year cover-up of the Tiwari report examining the killing of Bhai Gurdev Singh Konk. That's a big topic. Again, I don't have time to go into that. I'll talk about that very briefly in a moment. I'll come back to that topic. And a strategy for the release of Sikh political prisoners, Bandi Singhs, given those released to date have largely been through legal action, as the Indian government has made clear they do not recognise Sikh political prisoners. Again, a huge topic which we talked about on a regular basis. And they proposed various resolutions. Now, killing of Shahid Singh Sahib by Gurdev Singh Ji Konk, Jathedar Sri Akal Takht Sahib. Now, they called for the Fakhra-e-Qawm to be removed from Prakash Singh Badal, which of course has now happened. Fantastic, well done to the Akal Takht, due to his betrayal of the Panth and allowing injustice to prevail for many years and being in office of Chief Minister for 3 terms, 15 years. At Sabat Khalsa 2015, in a gathering of hundreds and thousands, resolution number 4 was approved by the Sabat Khalsa gathering to remove the Fakhra-e-Qawm. Also, Avtar Singh Makar's Shiromani Sevak Award was taken back. In light of this, we support the decision taken by the Sangat at Sabat Khalsa 2015. Legal action to be taken on any politicians, including the Badal family, that helped to ensure inaction around the torture and assassination of Jathedar Sahib. What's all this about? I'll come back to this in a moment. But again, they are calling in this letter 12 months ago for the Akal Takht to take action against Badal, which has now happened. A call for legal action on police and agency officials that were involved in the torture and assassination of the Jathedar Sahib. Organisations should write to Jathedar of Akal Takht Sahib and the SGPC to ensure we call for action, etc., etc. And it goes on. Fakhra-e-Qawm to be given to the family of, on behalf of Shahid Bhai Gurdev Singh Konk. And then also they called on from a political basis to ensure impartiality due to relationships between SGPC leadership and the Badal family. We urge the Jathedar of the Akal Takht to set up a coordinating committee with representatives from all Panthic Jathabandian and those leading various campaigns and morchas for the release of Bandi Singhs and those recently detained. Now, this is all very complex, but it's all very important. Basically, key word here is impartiality. They recognise, even here in the UK, they recognise how in the Punjab, the SGPC and potentially the Akal Takht have been infiltrated by bad actors, by actors of the Indian state. Of course, Badal family being just one of others who have managed to infiltrate these organisations and have caused so many problems. So they're saying we need to ensure that impartiality is restored so that these malign influences from the Indian state are removed, they're pushed out, and true Sikhs who represent, in simple terms, the true Sikh faith are reinstalled and reinstated back into these institutions so that these decisions can be made without outside influence. Here, there should be exclusion of anyone connected with the Badal family and the Akali Dal Badal, as they have lost confidence of Sikhs. This is to coordinate and bring all campaigns together. Again, uniting the Sikh voice. This should be completed within 4 months. Overall resolution, 40 years after the Sikh genocide, it remains committed to the Sikh homeland of Khalistan. So again, it's calling for unification, the unification of the Sikh voice to support Khalistan. And any Singhs in official posts that have taken decisions against the Panth should be removed from their post. Jathedar, Sri Akal Takht Sahib and SGPC should take action. Well, good news, of course, is that as of Monday, they have taken this massive, decisive action. And, well, I say massive and decisive. Again, it hasn't gone far enough, but it is a stepping stone to taking action against the Badals and other bad actors. Now, I'm going to quickly circle back. This was a shocking revelation. And when I talk about peeling back the layers, James, in that letter from Smethik Gurdwara, Guru Nanak Gurdwara, they referred to Gurdev Singh Konk. Now, who was Gurdev Singh Konk? He was a Sikh priest who served as the acting Jathedar of the Akal Takht back in the 1980s, between 1986 to 1993. This is during those dreadful, terrible times in the Punjab of extrajudicial killings. A Sabak Khalsa was called in the Akal Takht in Amritsar in 1986. At that gathering, the delegation announced Jaspir Singh Road as the Jathedar of the Akal Takht. Of course, the Akal Takht, one of the five Panj Takhts of Sikhi. It's one of the most important, the Akal Takht. So, Rode was imprisoned during his appointment. Therefore, the delegation assigned Konk to serve as the acting Jathedar of Akal Takht. So, Konk became the acting Jathedar, in other words, the person in charge, in simple terms, the chief of the Akal Takht. He became one of the most important figures in the Sikh religion in the Punjab. In April of 1986, the Panthik Committee held a press conference at the Harmandir Sahib, the Golden Temple, and declared an independent Punjabi Sikh homeland of Khalistan. Straight after this declaration, all members of the Panthik Committee escaped as the police and the army surrounded the premises and arrested Jathedar Konk, being the only person of significance at the complex. In May the following year, just a few months later, the Committee for Coordination of Disappearances in Punjab investigated what happened subsequently. It was an enforced disappearance, here we go again, familiar, of Gurdev Singh Konk. The CCDP, that committee, acquired conclusive evidence to show after Konk was arrested, he was inhumanly tortured first at Sadar police station and then at the CIA interrogation centre of Jagraon from 25th December 1992 to January 1993. The committee also acquired irrefutable evidence to establish that the former Jathedar of Akal Takht was killed under torture. Now, to put this into context, this gentleman, the Jathedar of the Akal Takht, was one of the most senior people of the Sikh faith in the Punjab. He was arrested, he was tortured, and then he was disappeared. In other words, he was extrajudicially killed. This is equivalent. I mean, the enormity of this, people need to understand how significant this is. He is equivalent to a senior imam in the Islamic religion being taken away by the police and quietly murdered in the countryside. This is equivalent to an archbishop in the Christian faith, likewise being disappeared and just quietly murdered in the countryside. The enormity of this is massive. And this is why we mustn't forget things like this. So this Jathedar was taken away and murdered by Indian police. Again, and this is why we must not forget the enormity of what happened in the 1980s and 1990s. This was allowed to happen by the Indian government. And this was all linked, and it all comes back full circle to the Badal family, Chief Minister of Punjab, etc., Prakash Badal, etc. This is why the community keep pushing this and will not let this lie, because all these stories, these horror stories of the 1980s and how significant things like this happened, they mustn't be forgotten. And this is why the community, the SGPC, the Akal Takht are still keeping these stories alive, and still recriminations must be found, is that we must not let the guilty get away with acts like this, because they were so important. So just to wrap up then, as again, sadly we're running out of time. So what has happened then since the announcement, the reaction from around the world to the action of the Akal Takht and the humiliation, the rightful humiliation of Sukhbir Badal and the withdrawal of that honour of his father? Well, I'm just going to show you a quick video in a second. This is breaking news coming out from Amritsar. I showed you the video of Sukhbir sitting there with his placard. Well, it turns out there has been an assassination attempt on his life at the Darbar Sahib. And let me just quickly show you this video now of what happened. It's quite shocking, actually. It happened very quickly. I'll show it again just so you can see. You can see on the right-hand side, Sukhbir Badal sitting with his placard around his neck in humiliation, in rightful humiliation. Coming from the left, in that black turban is a gentleman. Pulls out a pistol, tries to shoot, and somebody, a guard, just in time, manages to take him away. So pretty shocking scenes, but never will I defend violence or certainly political assassination in cold blood. I mean, we cannot support violence, but ultimately we can explain it. And in the context of what I've just described about Gonk, the Shahid Gonk in the 1980s, this senior figure, not just senior, one of the most senior figures of the Sikh faith was extrajudicially murdered by the Indian state. This is what happens. This is why Indira Gandhi, or one of the reasons why Indira Gandhi was assassinated for such crimes. And this explains why, likewise, the Badal sitting there in humiliation were clearly an assassination attempt. Now, who was behind this? We don't know for sure. It's all speculation at the moment, but the current speculation is that Bhai Narendra Singh Chora was potentially behind this assassination attempt. Who was, or who is Bhai Narendra Singh Chora? He was a central figure in the Sikh movement for Khalistan throughout the 1980s and 1990s, when that dreadful time was happening, when those tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Sikh young men were taken out into the countryside and murdered. He was a leading figure in this fight back, this justified fight back against this dreadful persecution and killing of Sikhs. He was a leading member of the Akal Federation, one of the earliest groups committed to Khalistan, and he's played a critical role in shaping the resistance. Tomorrow, I will give a bit more background to this guy and what he was about. He actually is quite a heroic figure. He has quite a history behind him. And again, it's very easy for Hindutva and the right wing of India to say, oh, they're all terrorists. I refer back, James, to what we were talking about, the right wing referring to the Hindus in Bangladesh being persecuted. The right wing in India currently demanding that Hindus should be armed and trained and they should fight back in a militant fashion in Bangladesh against persecution and genocide. Well, this is what happened in the Punjab in the 1980s, as I've just referred to, where key figures, important figures, were murdered in cold blood out in the countryside by the Indian state. They rose up and they fought back, just as the right wing in India are demanding that Hindus in Bangladesh do the same. So all these stories are interlinked. The hypocrisy runs rife. There's an awful lot of layers here, James. Too much to go into great detail, but hopefully for our audience there, an awful lot going on at this very moment. But I think all this is signifying that it's rising up again. Things are happening. Is that in a legal, apart from obviously this assassination attempt, but otherwise, when we refer back to the Akal tax action and all the Sikh organisations around the world, across the diaspora, and now in the Punjab itself, in the form of the Akal tax, they are fighting back, they are rising up, they are joining, they are unifying forces. This is all part of uniting and taking back control, James. The movement towards Khalistan is gathering momentum. This is all part of this multilateral approach where Khalistan is going to become realised, because finally the Sikh community at last is getting together. It is uniting under one banner. It is uniting in one voice, and it is doing it peacefully, and it is doing it lawfully, and it is doing it democratically.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, we bring up the impartiality and the leadership in which they want to move forward, which is very commendable. And what's also important is that we look at it that, of course, we know that the BJP, the RSS, and others have infiltrated the system. And to imagine, if we go back to the other stories that we've covered for months now, and even longer, about the foreign interference of the India government. Imagine what they are doing within their own country against the Sikh community without all of the international eyes on them, where they're able to cover it up, Angus. It's quite horrible when we look at what the India government's gotten away with. But as again, we've said before, power and change comes in numbers, and that's where we're heading now. And that's a great thing to see for the future of Khalistan.
Absolutely. It's gathering momentum. The weight is building and that momentum is building.
Right.
And it's pushing back, and India is now being pushed back onto the back foot now. This is what's happening. And also when India's on the back foot, it always reverts to desperate measures. It's already tried to assassinate many Khalistan activists. It was a massive mistake, and this has actually reinforced and pushed more weight into this momentum, pushing back on the Indian government. So I think we're living through exciting times for the whole Khalistan movement. Okay, James,
right.
let us move forward now and talk about time, and we must rush into our comments section. Of course, many comments piled in over for many of our videos. Thank you as always to our audience for your wonderful comments. And we'll start today with a comment from Kalstani Jat, who says the Khalistan journey actually started 550 years ago. It did indeed, as we rightly pointed out, with the very first guru. Today's talk show, nothing less than a university. 90% of Sikhs never heard of combinations of politics and religion or religious messages together. Yeah, this is almost a philosophical comment, really. First of all, we're forming part of a university almost. We're trying to be as educational as possible, only because James and I are going through an enormous journey of education, learning about both the Sikh faith and, of course, as I referred to, the deeply complex politics and history of the Punjab. But, of course, as you rightly point out, politics and religion messaging together. Politics and religion are, I would say, inextricably linked when it comes to the Punjab and India. Although, despite the fact that India and the Indian constitution is supposed to be secular, in reality it is deeply involved in politics, and the history of the subcontinent is, of course, deeply embedded with religion. And I think it's almost impossible when we talk about India to separate, particularly since Modi's regime took control. It's impossible now, James, to separate politics from religion.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see, that in the Western world too, with different faiths, how embedded they are into the principles of politics as well. So.
Yeah, and the next couple of comments from Kashmir and Amardeep Sandhu say the young generation should know, of course, about the golden history. The history of the Punjab and the Sikh community is enormous. It's exciting. It's heroic. There's so many great words to describe the Sikh history, and we keep saying there should be films about it. There should be more films about it, and certainly about the Sikh Empire and the rise of that, etc. It's got such a rich and deep cultural history, and it is a golden history that many more should know about. And as Amardeep says, even Sikhs don't know this much yet because there's so much to know, and it's part of, like James and I, as we're learning, I think we all have a responsibility to ensure that the young are educated, particularly about the recent history of the Punjab and the 1980s and 90s. It's so critical that these stories and this history, first of all, the long history shouldn't be forgotten about, but also the recent history, which is so deeply important and still has such an important legacy today, whether it's 1984 and the genocide, the attack on the Golden Temple, or whether it's the extrajudicial killings through the 80s and 90s, and as we just referred to, what happened during those times. They must not be forgotten because the perpetrators are still alive and running free, and therefore they still need to be held to account, etc., etc. So again, James, there is so much involved in this, so much even in recent history.
And I appreciate that even our viewers are reaching out to say, that they haven't really gotten all of this information for the young. Because again, if you are living in a Western world, they don't teach a lot of the Sikh history in schools, in history class. So it's important that as we learn, we want to educate others as well, both within and outside of the Sikh community, Angus.
Yeah, absolutely right. And as Jaspal Chatterfell says in his comment, thanks for spreading the word, but it's about the world becoming aware why Sikhs are asking for this unofficial referendum for their sovereign nation and what it's all about. And that's our responsibility, James, as it is others, to spread the good word to a wider audience, to those outside the Sikh community, to explain it. So Okay, let's move on to Pal Singh PSS, who says, well explained. Well, thank you very much. We do our best. Hindus, especially related to the Goon Party BJP, are deliberately misusing and abusing the Sikhs. Guru Nanak Sahib totally disagreed with Hindus and Muslims philosophy. That's why God Nanak himself created a new religion. We had our regime, but the British has uprooted it. They asked Sikhs in 1947 for a separate nation, but some Sikh leaders denied. Yeah, it's all about the betrayal, James. Oh dear, it's such a shameful part of history. I mean, the British Empire has its hand, of course, in this. They didn't just defeat the Sikh Empire, but they totally betrayed the Sikhs, despite such an enormous contribution, even to the empire itself, whether that was First World War or otherwise, is that we betrayed it. But it wasn't just the British, it was also members of the Sikh community itself betrayed it, whether through incompetence or whether it was deliberate, in separation, in partition, in that of course, they were made promises that were never fulfilled, so they were likewise betrayed by the Hindus. Of course, that was certainly through malign intentions, but even some of the Sikh representatives in 1947, yeah, they betrayed it, again, whether willfully or otherwise. It's just a story of betrayal, James, is it not? It's just deeply sad.
Absolutely. And, it is something that we touch on all the time, but it's, just the future of Khalistan is going to really make up for a part of what's happened in the past. So let's keep that positive thought for the future.
Well, let's talk about global geopolitics, because Matlal talks about let India join Russia and China. Again, this BRICS alignment. West has always been an enemy of India. Well, has it? I would actually turn it the other way around. I think India has always been an enemy of the West. I think the West has been trying its hardest to get India on side, because actually strategically it needs it as an ally against Russia and China. But I think it's India who have been deeply embedded with Russia, or should I say the other way around, Russia's been deeply embedded in India, as we've talked about regularly. That has made India become an enemy of the West. So, and then your other point about how about Khalistan formed out of Pakistan? This again is another whole area. Of course, the Punjab divided by partition into Pakistan as well on the west. Again, James, we talked a lot about this, is that Khalistan should indeed be formed out of the Punjab in Pakistan, but likewise the Punjab in India as well. In a perfect world, it would reunite the Punjab, which has been divided twice since 1947, of course, and it should reunite those two areas. Certainly, the old East and West Punjab should be reunited back into one Punjab. Unfortunately, I think real politics and the reality on the ground is that it's unlikely, certainly at least in stage one of Khalistan, maybe further down the line. Again, it will be a democratic process. And if Punjab in Pakistan would democratically demand self-determination to form part of Khalistan, then it's quite possible it could happen, James. Anything happens in democracies.
Yeah, and we also have touched on the fact that it was the Indian government of the day that really deceived the Sikh community and screwed them out of their entitled areas of sovereignty. So, of course, I think that's the important foundation of having Khalistan formed in India before it expands over to Pakistan.
And a slightly cheeky comment, a bit of a dig at India from Jura Rai, says thousands of millions of Indians, yet their average in the Olympics is only 0.005 gold medals. How strong they are, you sarcastically comment. I think this is, we're not anti-Indian, we're very pro-Indian, but I think we right. Can't help just a little dig. Come on, you've got 1.4 billion people and you've only managed 0.005 gold medals. Yet you compare it to the athletes from the Punjab, and I actually haven't, and you haven't done the mathematics here, but I think the mathematics the Punjab will be massively, significantly better than 0.005. So thank you for pointing that comment out. Right, James, Critics Corner is back. I'm delighted to report. Right, now TC8410 said, thoroughly researched, educational, factual content, accurately presented and evidence-based content. Well done. Well, thank you, TC, for your wonderful comment. Yet, Pankaj Kumar, piles in and says, thoroughly researched, this is garbage content, talking about things that are non-existent in reality. Well, thoroughly researched, the garbage content? I hope not. I mean, these actually are, I would say, thoroughly researched in the time that we have allowed to it. But if you if you do think it is garbage, point out why. Don't just call it garbage, explain why it's garbage. And talking about things that are non-existent in reality. Well, what are we talking about that's non-existent? Explain. Don't just throw out an insult. That's boring. Yeah. At least explain why. And then Pankaj comes back with an excellent comment. Why is Angus Scott seeming like a comedian to me? Well, here I go again, James. I think once again, two comedians running a comedy show to entertain Khalistanis. Well, thank you very much for that compliment. And hopefully the Khalistanis are entertained, James.
I left my red nose at home, but...
Indeed. I mean, how wonderful. If our presenting careers come to an end, we know we can join the comedy circuit thanks to Pankaj Kumar's support. So thank you for your comments.
Yeah, they're still watching, Angus, even if they call it garbage.
Now, one of our more serious critics, Ashley Kandar, comes on, and Ashley is a regular in our comments columns, and I would say his comments are always much more considered rather than just throwing out a random insult, which is always fun to laugh at. But Ashley comes back usually with some pretty sensible comments. He says, "Total nonsense. This is the neo-Sikh propaganda, nowhere near the truth. How long did Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire last? How many wives did he have? How many Hindu and Muslim wives did he have? How many wives committed sati when he died?" I think sati, off memory, I think that's when they commit suicide if their husband dies out of obligation, which actually I think it was the British, stopped that. What did the Sikhs? Oh, that's something we'll have to research, James, and I'm sure our audience will have comments on that one. Who run Gurdwaras during his time? Lots of questions to answer, hey? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, I don't have time to answer them in detail, but what I would say on that actually is different times. It's very easy to judge. Don't forget, we're going back to the 16th century. The empire was the 19th century. And again, they were different times. And of course, when we go back to the first guru, the 16th century, again, different times. It's very easy to judge through the lens of the 21st century and criticise our forefathers. What matters is the central core message that has survived through the centuries, through to today. Yes, we can all go back. I can criticise the British Empire from many, many different angles, but ultimately it has brought us to many of the good things that have happened today. Likewise, I think if you're criticising Maharaja Ranjit Singh, yeah, he probably wasn't 100% pure, should we say, and I'm sure there were an awful lot of things wrong with Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But what I would say is he did many good things that have survived, and I think his legacy still remains positive. However, I am sure members of our audience will have answers to lots of these questions. So please, to our audience, if you'd like to address many of Ashley's questions here, please feel free to do so. And your final point, Ashley, is I just can't see the point of this Khalistani drive. There must be a better way to achieve your goals. Now, this is actually a very good comment because, first of all, what actually are the goals of the Khalistani movement? Now, obviously, on the face of it, it's very simple. We want our own homeland. It is self-determination. And I think Ashley's point here is, look, dig down deeper. What is it actually that you do want? Is it really your own nation, or is it something else? Is it you just want to have more control over managing your own affairs? Is it just to practice your religion in freedom without fear, etc.? If that's what you want, you don't necessarily need a homeland. There are other ways to achieve this. I mean, for example, I'll go back a bit of history here. The Anandpur Resolution back in the 1980s, prior to 1984 genocide, etc., and Bhindranwale. That actually wasn't about Khalistan. They were just demands made upon Gandhi's government just for simple autonomy over natural water resources, etc. A little bit more self-autonomy, should we say? It wasn't about Khalistan. Maybe that's what Ashley's referring to, James. But anyway, I think there's a lot of interesting, a slightly different angle here to the whole Khalistan movement.
Absolutely, and again, it comes up in the comments every once in a while. However, we also try to, they can call it propaganda, they can call it whatever they want. But again, we are looking at the false narrative being put out there by the Hindutva, by the India government, the BJP, the RSS, and so forth. So we are here to counter that opinion and bring the truth as we see it. And let's face it, I don't know how many wives he had. I have a hard enough time keeping one happy, so my hat's off to anybody that can do that with more than one. But I joke, and that's all it, right? We're comedians, Angus.
Of course we are. So thank you to each of our contributors on Critics Corner. Always highly entertaining, one of my favourite sections. Right, and here we go with our last set of comments. Jorai again says, good morning, gentlemen, and good morning to you, and good morning to our whole audience. Breathing, so easy to see. Watch your show. Thanks, Khalistan Zindabad. I think what you're trying to say is you find it easier to breathe when you watch our show. It's relaxing. We're not just comedic heroes, James. I think we're helping people calm down and breathe easier, hopefully.
And back to the ex-wife. There's no calming those down.
let's quickly move on from that with Rajinder Joanda, who says, I like this channel. Always nothing but the truth. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And again, I refer back to our Critics Corner. It is the truth. It is nothing but the truth, or what we believe is the truth that we are trying to corroborate. We don't do misinformation on here. If we see misinformation, we call it out. We are doing our best to bring you the truth, James, are we not?
Absolutely. And if you have information contrary to what we do, by all means, share it here in the comments. We love to see both sides of it.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. That's what the comment section is all about. And that's why we welcome Critics Corner. Of course, we don't mind the odd insult. It's quite funny to have a laugh about it. But if you criticise us, explain what we're getting wrong, or if we've provided any misinformation, or we're telling lies or whatever, or our research is poor or whatever, correct us if we get things wrong. That's why we try to bring you the truth. And Greywell Sukhwinder says, actually, that we have, I think this is a very, I would say, or I think you're flattering us when you say we have a deep understanding about Sikh sovereignty issues. I don't think we do. We're doing our best, but it is so complex. And there are, of course, many other better experts out there than us. And that's actually what the podcast's about. Do watch our weekly podcast, because I try to bring in genuine experts, people who have dedicated their whole lives to researching the history of the Punjab, the history of the Khalistan movement, and so many of these issues that we cover on a daily basis. Of course, James and I, we are on this learning journey. Our knowledge is very shallow compared to many who really have a genuine interest or a deep interest to go back through the enormous, I mean, what could be literally tens of thousands of pages of research in many of the people that I've interviewed. About many of the subjects. They've literally dedicated their lives to academic research of these issues. That's something that James and I could never possibly repeat. But thank you, Greywell, for your comment. And I would say we're flattered, but no, I think our knowledge is increasing by the day, I would say. But we are doing our best to have this deep understanding. But essentially, we are a conduit. We are the facilitator. We are bringing the experts and expert opinion and knowledge to our audience. We are just here to try and translate it and bring it in an easily packaged format, James, are we not, to our audience?
Absolutely. We are fortunate enough that you are able to bring on such high caliber guests on your podcast, Angus, and we appreciate every one of those and the time they spend as guests to bring that knowledge.
Indeed, and I'll leave the final comment to M. Verdi, who says, I love your Punjabi, Angus. Well, I think, once again, we're talking about flattering. I think you might be slightly flattering of my Punjabi, which is, unfortunately, a current state of appalling at best. But I do my best. I think it stretches as far as Khalistan Zindabad, but that's about it. But anyway, on that Punjabi note, we must draw things to a close once again for another show. But thanks so much for all your comments. Do keep them coming. As I say, it always makes a great end of the show to cover lots of your educational, interesting, and even sometimes critical and insulting comments, which always make for a great laugh. But thank you for those. Do keep them coming. And of course, you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention that you don't want to put in the public domain. But that is it for another show. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
And you have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.